for a couple of years now is we had a partnership with OSU Extension to do what's called the Broadband Ohio Accelerator program. And that program was designed to make sure that local leaders all across the state of Ohio had an opportunity to do a broadband plan for their county or their community. And what's been happening is that with more and more federal funding that's becoming available, instead of having it be what it was, which was a 9 to 12-week course that you sat down and did a whole bunch of stuff in, we wanted to come out and talk to everyone in the community and say, this is what's coming, so you could understand what universal coverage in Ohio is going to look like, how the BEAD program, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, works, and just a little bit about broadband in general, and then answer any questions that you may have. So this is our agenda. We're going to start with welcome and introductions. We're going to go through Broadband 101. We're going to do progress in our current initiatives, the federal funding with a specific look at broadband equity access and deployment of the BEAD program, a talk about looking ahead, resources and partnerships. We're going to touch briefly on digital opportunity and then go into Q&A. So before I get into any of that, I always like to talk about the vision of Broadband Ohio. We started 5 years ago. I was actually the founding member of Broadband Ohio. I began on March 3rd, 5 years ago, 1 week before the pandemic hit. So I do get to claim that I started the broadband office prior to the pandemic. So we can claim that even if it was only 1 week before. But when we started the office, we created a vision of how we wanted to make sure internet got out to everyone in the community. So you see up there, the first is to bring reliable, affordable, high-speed internet to every Ohioan in their home and in their community. So when we say reliable and affordable and high speed, what do we mean? Well, the first thing is reliable, right? We want you to be able to get online and stay online when you need to. And let me ask a question. I always love to start with this. Raise your hand if you have high speed internet access today. If it's in your house today, go ahead and raise your hand. All right? A good majority of us, right? Yeah, some people are like, I don't know if I do, but like, yeah, so a good majority of us. So let me ask all of you this. For everyone who just raised their hand and said yes, how does it feel when it goes down for 15 minutes? Just 15 minutes. Or how about an hour, right? How different do you do your job? Do you do entertainment? Do you talk to people? How different does it look when you lose your internet for an hour or even a day? You know, how fast are you on the phone being like, you gotta come do something because I have to get internet back. I can't do my job, I can't do school, I can't do anything, right? So much of what we do is online. So when we talk about reliable, we want to make sure that when you need that connection, it's there, right? When we talk about affordable, we want to make sure that you have an option that's for you that you can get affordably in your home, right? For the BEAD program, we have a specific provision that talks about a $30 a month plan. And for most of our other projects, we work with the internet service provider who wins our grants to talk about what affordable options they're able to offer to the constituencies that they're going to be serving. And when we say high speed, we specifically mean 100 megabits per second download speed and 20 megabits per second upload speed. And you may ask, where did that definition come from? And I'm going to tell you, it came from the federal government. That's what they told me to do, right? But beyond that, the real reason we use 100 down and 20 up, which is what we call it vernacularly, we just go 100 down, 20 up. The reason we do that is because we want to make sure that more than one person in your house has the capability of being online at the same time. Has anybody ever been on a Zoom call and they get that little wheel that says you have an unstable internet connection, turn off your camera? It's because your upload speed, the ability for your picture to go up into the internet to the other person, is struggling. So we want you to have 100 down so you can very quickly get the information you need, and then 20 up so that you and multiple people have the capability of sending transmissions back outwards so that people can see what you're saying, or you can get that extra point in Call of Duty because you don't have any latency issues. These are the things we want to make sure you can do and be successful at. We also say in their home and in their community. To be clear, I don't want to force anyone to take it in their home, right? We want to make sure that no matter where you live, you have a provider that you can call that brings you high-speed internet, but we also want a place for you to go. You may be someone who goes like, look, I don't need to be online every day. I don't need to do it every day. I may only need it once a week, maybe twice a week. So we don't want you to be any further than 5 miles away from a community anchor institution where you can get online with free high-speed internet access. Now you might say, well, what's a community anchor institution? Well, we're in one, right? This is a public library. A library is a great example. Most libraries both have computer resources available as well as high-speed internet free through Wi-Fi. So that's what we want to make sure that no one's 5 miles away from that. And for those communities that don't necessarily have a library or a place open to the public within 5 miles, we want to work with them to identify them to make sure that there's a location that people are comfortable going to get online. The next is to promote the creation of world-class broadband networks throughout the state by the use of best-in-class technologies. Notice it says promote. Used to say build, and my internet service providers in the room were always like, well, you're not building it, we are. And I'm like, you're right. I'm a tax attorney originally. It's a very funny story about how I became a broadband chief. But you do not want an internet network run by a tax attorney. It would be awful. You might do well on your taxes, but everything else will be bad, right? We want to make sure that we have the internet service provider community as our partners to help build those networks. And when we say we want to use the best-in-class technologies, the 100 down and 20 up speed that we're talking about today is a change from just 5 years ago when high-speed internet was 25 megabits per second download and 3 megabits per second upload, right? So as we build out technology, we don't want to build out technology that is kind of reaching its limit at the current speeds that we need it to reach. We want there to be room to grow. We want to make sure that your communities, as they get connected, aren't in a position that 5 years from now, when it goes up to 100 megabits per second symmetrical, when it goes up to 200 down and 50 up, or whatever it changes into, that the technology you have deployed in your communities can keep pace with those increases in speeds and demand. We also say enable participation in the modern economy. So I'm going to put everybody in the room on the spot, and if you don't want to raise your hand, I get it. But has anyone in the last 5 years applied for any job anywhere? If you have, raise your hand. If anybody has applied for a job in the last 5 years, raise your hand. Okay, keep your hand up if you did it on paper. Nobody? Not one paper application in the group? How did you apply? Was it online? Yeah, that's how we apply for jobs, right? We apply for jobs, we go to school, we talk to our colleagues, we check our emails, we set up appointments. All those things happen online, right? Most jobs, most manufacturers, most companies don't want to go to communities that don't have internet, right? Because they want to be able to talk to their customer base, their suppliers, their vendors, and everything in between, right? So when we say you can't participate in the modern economy without actually having that internet access, that's what we mean, right? You can't actually get online to do those things that you need to do to be able to have a small business, or to be able to open a manufacturing plant, or to be able to upskill and reskill, or to be able to talk to your doctor, right? It may make more sense for you to get online and talk to your doctor than it is to drive 30 minutes to an appointment, right? And so those are the kinds of things we want to make sure can happen, that you can all participate in that from where you live if that's what you want to do. And the last one is to empower Ohioans through training and digital skills. The reason this is up there is because I do not want your first interaction online is you getting an email going, hi, I am a prince from a foreign country. If you give me $10,000, I will send you $1 million in a week, right? We don't want that, right? That's the worst thing that can happen. We want you, as you go ahead and get online, to one, have a device that's effective, right? I can tell you that my computer is 10 years old and it fails to download Yahoo half the time, right? So we want you to have a computer that works. I want you to have the skills so that you're protected and safe, and to know what you can use the internet for, to know how to use Zoom, to know how to use email, to know how to do all the things that many of us in this room take for granted because we've been doing it for a while. So those are the visions of Broadband Ohio. And the way that we're getting there is through my staff. So you see me at the top. I'm Peter Voderberg. I'm the chief. I have an assistant chief, Amy Elmore. Our senior financial analyst is LaShawna Smith. My grants manager is here with me today, Matt Taylor. So if anyone has any questions about our grants specifically, he is our go-to guy. We have a manager of digital equity and inclusion, Anna Miller. And then we have 2 grants administrators, Grace Klukas and Monty Taylor. So that is the Broadband Ohio team. That's everybody. Now, the good news for us in Ohio is that our broadband office is inside of the Ohio Department of Development. So we get a lot of back office support from our communications team, which we have a member of with us right now, and our engagement team, who's also with us right now, and our legal team and things like that. So that's how we make sure that our grants are legal, that they contain all of the things and bells and whistles they need for their contracts and stuff like that. So we're very lucky to be inside of a huge organization that's used to giving out grants, because that makes our jobs easier to be more efficient and effective when we go ahead and do that process. We are also joined by Kyle White and Sarah Mays from the OSU Extension Office. They have been fantastic partners with us throughout this entire process. They've been super helpful in helping us run the Accelerator programs when they were a 9 to 12-week course. They've been super helpful in helping us with these Accelerator programs too, to both get the word out, to help us with what we're talking about today, and to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the communities that we're going to. So let's talk a little bit about broadband 101. Whoop. So there's a lot of words up here. We're going to make sure if anyone wants these slides, you can get them. You do not need to read the words. You can, because I can be boring. But if you want to read the words, you can. But I will just tell you what these are. So the first one is last mile. Last mile is not a mile. It's called last mile. It's just what we call it. But it is not a mile. It is the thing that brings internet into your house. So for everybody who raised their hands, right, some of you may have a wire that comes from a telephone pole or underground to your house. That's the last mile. Some of you may have an antenna on your house, and it's connected to a tower somewhere else that's beaming a signal back and forth. That's the last mile. And some of you may have a satellite dish in your house, and that satellite dish is how you get internet. That's last mile. It's not the distance it travels, it just means it comes into your house, right? Then we have middle mile infrastructure. Middle mile infrastructure is what takes it from that last mile connection all the way out to the internet where it needs to grab whatever it's grabbing. So the fun thing we like to talk about is think about it like a highway, right? Last mile is your local road in your driveway. That's last mile. And then middle mile is the highway. Middle mile is the highway that you get on, and you go straight to where you're going, and you only get off at that last local road and driveway where you're trying to get to the other last mile to the server you're trying to connect to. So that's last mile and middle mile. And then you'll see underserved and unserved. Unserved is anyone who has less than 25 megabits per second download speed and 3 megabits per second upload speed. If you have that or less, you're unserved, which means that even if you have an internet provider today that's like, here you go, you can have 10.1 or anything in between, that is not considered served for the purposes of the state of Ohio or the federal government. Underserved is anyone who's in between that number and the high-speed number, which again is 100 megabits per second download and 20 megabits per second upload. That's underserved. That's someone who we would consider like you got something, but it's not what we want you to have to get you to high speed, right? So that's what those terms are. So we're going to talk, I keep doing that, I keep hitting it twice. So we're going to talk a little bit about technology. So up there you'll see fiber optic cable is just a big glass tube that you shoot light down. That's all it is, right? That glass tube is what connects most of our data centers, our internet exchanges, all the things where when you consider like what's the thing that you're getting to on the internet, most of those are connected through fiber to the internet, right? Like I said, it's just a glass tube that we shoot light down. The light goes from where you are to where it is, almost at the speed of light, and that's why it becomes high-speed internet, because it's going so fast to get it back to you. So that's what fiber optic cable is. When we talk about fixed wireless, that's that antenna, right? So fixed wireless uses a signal to go from one location to another location over the air typically, right? So you'll have something on a tower, and you'll have something on your house, or you'll have something on a tower and another tower, and that signal goes back and forth between the two, and that's how you get high-speed internet. We also have copper. So copper, for the most part, we don't utilize as much when we talk about high-speed internet. Copper is typically what you got to get, your telephone line. So for anyone who had a telephone line back in the day, and you remember the AOL startup jingle, right? That horrible crunching noise that was like nails on a chalkboard to many of us, right? That was over copper, because that was over your phone line. Now, certain technologies like DSL uses that copper, but a lot of our copper taps out at about 100 down and 20 up. So that's a technology that doesn't really keep pace with the continued increases in speeds. And the last one is satellite. And before a couple of years ago, we had geosynchronous satellites, which were way high in the air. And then now we have low Earth orbit satellites, which are much closer. So when we think about those geosynchronous satellites, because the signal has to go from Earth all the way up to that satellite and all the way back down to a station on the ground before it goes through fiber to get to the place it's trying to go to, that can take a while. It's far away, right? And when I say take a while, I'm saying like between 1 and 3 seconds. And while that doesn't sound like a lot, if you can imagine what it would be like if you had to wait 3 seconds to hear everything I was saying. And if you were trying to have real-time communication with someone, and I said something, and in the 3 seconds you were waiting to hear me, you said something, we couldn't have a good conversation because you would have a lot of talking over each other because you couldn't wait for the communication to be back and forth. With low Earth orbit satellites, the good news there is that many of our low Earth orbit satellites have gotten rid of that problem. That's called latency. It's how long it takes for the signal to come from me to get to you. And in that latency issue, low Earth orbit satellites can go much faster because they're much closer to Earth, so they have much less of that problem. So when we talk about satellite, we're talking about both, because some companies still use those large-scale, very high satellites, and then there are companies that use those low Earth orbit satellites to have that signal. But all of those, when I talk about satellites, the antennas, the wires, all that stuff, again, remember, that's all last mile. Even the satellite counts as last mile because it's how it gets into your house, and that satellite still needs fiber because when we bounce the signal up to the satellite, it bounces down to the ground and then goes over a fiber optic network typically to get to where it's going to get you the thing that you were looking for. So then we like to do this. This is the connecting a home to the internet. When I first started this job, if you had told me that a leprechaun lived in your modem and waved a magic wand to get you to Google, I probably would have believed you because I didn't know how it worked, right? But really what it is this, right? You sit at your computer and you type in to the search bar, like if you're in Google and you go, I want to go to Facebook, right? That computer sends a signal to your modem that says, this person's looking for Facebook. Your modem will turn that into a signal. It shoots down the wire, right? It's going to shoot that signal down the wire to your last mile connection. So it's going to come out of your house, and it's going to go to a connection to a middle mile connection. You can see here that this middle mile connection is a tower, because in Ohio, we have a company called Digital Access Ohio, which actually does do middle mile connectivity over the air. Typically, it will be a fiber optic connection, but it can be either way. And then that middle mile infrastructure is a highway that gets you all the way to the end to get to Facebook or Yahoo or Puppy Pictures or whatever the thing is that you are trying to download and look at your computer. It finds the right place and it zips it all the way back to you. And the reason we call it high-speed internet is because we're trying to have that happen in the blink of an eye, right, in a split second. Unlike, like I said, those AOL days when you would try to download, if anybody had Napster, I know it was illegal, but before then, if anybody had Napster, anybody remember setting up their computer in the middle of the night and being like, yes, I'm going to download Journey, Don't Stop Believing, and I'll see you tomorrow, and hopefully mom doesn't pick up the phone at 6 a.m. because it take the 8 hours to download it, right? If I told you that a song was going to take your children 8 hours to download, they'd be like, we're leaving. Like that would be, they do not understand the pain of that or of the person accidentally picking up the line and you have to just scream, put the line down, I'm downloading. So that's why we have high-speed internet, so you can do that quickly. So like I said, it then goes from there all the way back through the middle mile to the last mile to your modem. Your modem receives that signal. It goes ahead and deciphers it and then displays what you were trying to look for on the internet. So that's literally what it is. That's how easy it is. And the coolest thing that I always like to bring up is that your computer and the internet itself was designed to go through the path of least resistance, which means if you asked me or anyone in this room who's a network engineer and you said, like, show me the exact route that signal will take from where it is to get to the router and back or to the server and back, the answer is whatever the easiest path is at the time. It will go down the easiest path through the network to get it the fastest it can and bring it back to you the fastest it can. So we're talking about milliseconds to be able to see the thing that you're looking at, because again, the signal goes almost the speed of light. So, all right, so let's talk about our progress. So what have we been doing, right? For the most part, we have been working on identifying all of those unserved and underserved locations, right? We've been using a series of challenge processes to correct the inaccurate coverage data that we had, to make sure that we're ensuring that the funding is reaching the communities in need, and to making sure that we know where all of those unserved and underserved houses are. And the reason that we're doing that is because we don't want to overbuild. Again, the internet service providers are our partners. I don't want to pay someone else money to go to a location that someone's already serving. So we've been working really hard to make sure that we know where all of those people are. And you might say, where are they? And here you go. Here is one of our first examples. So after we did one of our challenge processes, this is what it looked like. So red and blue are bad, gray is good. So every red and blue dot up there represents an unserved or underserved address. Now you'll see on the legend down here, which is very, very tiny, that at the time of making this, it was 122,000 unserved and 110,000 underserved in the state of Ohio. That map that you are looking at does not consider any of the federal commitments that we have today. So there weren't any federal commitments. That was mostly just state commitments, right? And it's wrong. And the reason it's wrong is because we've been working for years to try to get as accurate of data as possible, and it's hard to do. Prior to what's called the Data Act, which was the act that made the FCC try to say what every single address had, whether it was served or unserved, right? Prior to that, our internet service providers reported through what was called 477 data. 477 data was when an internet service provider said, hey, guess what? There's this huge census block group right here. I know I can serve one house, so I get to claim I serve the whole census block group. So census block groups in rural areas can be big. And so if you can hit one house in a census block group in a rural area and claim coverage for the whole thing, the likelihood was that you didn't cover the whole thing. Anybody remember those Verizon maps when they're like, look, we cover like 98% of the state. And then you were like, I'm on the phone and I can't talk and I'm in the purple, right? Or the red, right? And the reason that was because it was the same thing, right? They could claim that their technology reached an entire census block group as long as they could prove that their tower could get into part of it, right? And so what we've been doing is we've been working with the FCC on the Data Act to make it as accurate as possible on an address level specific basis. Those dots are people's homes. Those aren't just abstractions of like where we think people are. Those are houses, right? And so when we look at the map, this is what it looks like. So if you could go see the Data Act today, this is the FCC map, and you can see all of the green dots are people that are served. All of the red dots are people that are not in this area. And this area you can see is in Paulding County. It's where we were yesterday. We were 20 minutes late for everyone who was there yesterday. I'm so sorry we were. We got stuck under a bridge. We almost hit a dog. It was a very traumatic 2.5-hour drive to Paulding County. But you can see here that all those green dots have availability and the red dots do not. Now, when you say, well, who serves them? The great thing is over here, you can see all of these people that serve them. So in this location, we have Agile Networks, but they're not high speed. We have HughesNet, which is 100 down, but notice they can only do 5 up, so they would also not be considered served. We have Metalink. They are licensed fixed wireless at 100 down and 25 up. They would count as service. We have licensed fixed wireless at 100 down and 25 up from SAA BrightNet. Same thing. We have Spectrum, which can give you a gig down and 35 up, which is great, and so they would consider served. And you could go through this whole thing and see, so Starlink, and then Windstream. Although with copper, it's possible that 100 down and 20 up is the best that they could do, whereas many of these other technologies have the capability of going past that. So that's where you can see. Now, we got a good question yesterday, and someone said, like, well, wait a minute, if you look up there, right, you can see Starlink says 220 down and 25 up. There's a lot of locations in Ohio that say that about Starlink, and so the question was, does the fact that all of these locations in Ohio have Starlink mean that those locations are now ineligible for funding? And the answer I tell you right now is no. Even if Starlink says that they can give you more than 100 down and 20 up, as of today, the way the program works at the federal government is it is not seen as a served address. So today, if you have only Starlink, you would still be an unserved address, right? It is possible that they may change with some of the changes the federal government is considering with the BEAD program. But as of today, if you were only served by Starlink or any satellite really at all, or unlicensed fixed wireless, all of those things would mean that you are still an unserved or underserved address for the purposes of the state of Ohio. You'll also see up there, notice it with circled, it says availability challenge. So the FCC allows us to challenge those addresses. And when I say us, I mean everybody in this room. Any human being can go to the FCC map today, you could look at it online, and you could go ahead and say, yes, I do or do not have service. Now here's what's fascinating, notice it's online, right? So imagine for a moment that you do not have internet at your house. And someone tells you, hey, guess what? This internet service provider says they have internet at your house. And you go, well, how do I challenge them? I'm like, oh, go online, fill out an online form, and tell them that you don't have internet at your house. So we knew that that was difficult, right? So the things that we did in Ohio to actually get this map as accurate as possible is 2 things. One, we had a huge webinar for all of the librarians all across the state of Ohio. We did a webinar that helped train those librarians and provided them with resources so that they could tell people how to do this from computers in the library, right? So they knew how to walk someone through a challenge process to see if they did or didn't have coverage. And the second thing we did is we worked with a consultant to identify about 80,000 addresses that were likely not served even though service was claimed on the FCC map. And we sent out 80,000 letters that said, hey, a map says you have internet. We don't think you do. Send this back to us, and if you don't have internet, we will challenge it for you, and we'll submit the evidence on your behalf. And from that, we actually got over 1,000 additional challenges to be taken care of. Because again, like I said, like we were saying at the beginning with the modern economy comment, right? Everyone expects you to be online for everything, apparently even when they're asking you to make a challenge about whether you are or are not online, right? So we've been taking steps to make sure that we can keep working with people who don't have that access today. So then we have, this is the challenge process overview. You can see, basically, it enabled providers to kind of say, like, we are or are not in an area, or they could also say, hey, other providers are or are not in that area too, because actually we had a couple that were able to do that. They gave us a challenge, and then they gave us a data submission. So they basically were like, here you go, here's our evidence one way or the other. During our challenge process, for the most recent challenge, which was to challenge the FCC map, for our purposes, basically what ended up happening was providers could challenge, local leaders could challenge, and then nonprofits could challenge. Individual citizens could not. Part of the reason that why individual citizens could not is because the company that runs the whole Data Act, that whole FCC map, licenses people to be able to look at it, and citizens cannot be licensed to look at it. Only state governments, local governments, nonprofits, and ISPs can. And so as a result, that's why we had to keep it to that group for the challenge process. Now what we did do is we talked to our County Commissioners Association, our Mayor's Alliance, our Municipal League, Township Association. We have a group of things called Regional Digital Inclusion Alliances, which are big groups of nonprofits. We work through them. We work through the Appalachian Regional Commission. We worked through all these channels to try to get out the word as much as we could, and then provided resources and webinars to say, if you're interested in doing this, we're going to help you through it. And we did that because we were, again, the whole point of this exercise was to make the map as accurate as possible. In so doing that, the other thing that we were able to do is prior to the BEAD program, we had things called the Ohio Residential Broadband Expansion Grant Program. Its acronym is ORBEG, which is not what I necessarily wanted it to be called, but that's what it's called, right? And our joke is always an internet service provider can either fund it itself or beg. That was the joke. It's not a good one, but that's what we say. So the idea here is that with the Ohio Residential Broadband Expansion Grant Program, it's designed to cover the gap in any project that keeps that project from being profitable. So if you're an internet service provider and you're like, I really want to go to these 10 addresses, it's going to cost me $2 million to get there. But if it costs more than $1 million, I won't make any money, right? You can then go through the ORBEG process and say, if I had just another $1 million, I could make this whole project work. And so the request would be that you would be requesting $1 million, you'd have a $1 million match, and you'd give us the addresses, and that would be your application. We'd review it, we'd score it, it would go to what's called the Broadband Expansion Program Authority. It's also known as BEPA, which I always think is funny because every time I hear someone call it BEPA, all I can think of is Buca de Beppo. That's just how I am. But the Broadband Expansion Program Authority oversees all the work that we do in my office. They review it with us, and then they review it publicly at a hearing where they talk about the recommendations that we have made, and they decide whether to either go with our recommendations or to not. And so the Broadband Expansion Program Authority, you can see here, these were our most recent rounds. So those are all the counties that were affected by the second round of the Ohio Residential Broadband Expansion Grant Program. Now, when you look at that, you're going to be like, haha, look. For the most part, I know in Northeast Ohio there is, because Ashtabula is up there and a few other counties, right? But you're going to say, why was Appalachia not represented on this map? And I will tell you, the first round of the Ohio Residential Broadband Expansion Grant Program was mostly Appalachian counties. Athens got some money. A whole bunch of our southeastern, southwestern counties, a lot of them did receive funding in the first round. The second round the scoring process was changed a little bit, and it made it so that other counties received a little bit more, the scoring was a little bit better for other counties, and so some of those projects were just rose to the top. So, but there was a lot of participation from our Appalachian counties in the first round. So I can also tell you this, when we started the Broadband Ohio program, actually I'll just go back to this because it's not the next slide I wanted to look at. When we started the Broadband Ohio program, and I'll talk more about this in a minute, it was estimated that 300,000 homes in the state of Ohio, 300,000 homes in the state of Ohio did not have access to 25.3. So they did not have access to 25 megabits per second download speed and 3 megabits per second upload speed. That was the estimate. And again, the reason it was an estimate because this predated the address-specific map. So I couldn't go to a map and go like, oh, look, 123 Main Street does, but 125 Main Street doesn't. As of today, right now, there are only about 60,000 homes left that do not either have 25.3 access or have a commitment for that. So we went from 300,000 homes 5 years ago as an estimate to 60,000 today. Now, it will be clear, I'm not saying that all of those 240,000 addresses are built. I'm telling you that between federal, state, and local commitments and some building, we have gotten commitments for just about 240,000 addresses, right? Which is great. It's not great for the people who are in that 60,000 or for the people who still don't have it built today, but the fact that we've been able to so quickly get those commitments is really a testament to how well we've been working with our internet service provider community, our nonprofits, and our local leaders to try to get action on this process. Now remember what I said, originally 25.3 was the first thing we were going for, and then we changed the speed to being 100 down and 20 up. So 60,000 people at 25.3, we have just about another 60,000 that don't have the 100 down and 20 up. So altogether we have about 120,000-ish folks who need to get high-speed internet in the state of Ohio, right? So that's what we're working on. So when I go to the BEAD program, that's the number we're trying to shoot for, is to get to those people who don't have it today. So let's talk about BEAD, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. So the big thing that you can see is that basically it was on investment, it was through the investment in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It was the largest federal investment to date in broadband. We're supposed to close the digital divide by 2030. We had $42.5 billion for the entire nation. And after that, we have $800 million in funding just about for the state of Ohio. So sounds like a lot, but I will tell you this. When we first did the Residential Broadband Expansion Grant Program, we had $232 million. We got $1.1 billion worth of ask for that money. And the program that you just saw the slide for, when we had just about $80 million, right, that had $790 million worth of ask, right? So it takes a lot of money to be able to get this infrastructure out there. So this is more representative of what we believe the map looks like today. Now you're going to say it doesn't look very different from the other one. Unfortunately, this one got a little blurry, and we will give you better maps. But these maps will be available in the coming weeks. We'll be able to show you exactly where the Ohio Challenge process concluded. You'll be able to see those maps and see every address that is otherwise served or unserved in the state of Ohio. You can see, too, the total allocation is $793 million, and we have approximately 117,000 that are left between unserved and underserved, right? That is the goal. We will have a plan by the end of January of next year to serve every single one of those addresses. We are required to. To be able to access that $800 million in funding, we have to have that plan. Now, normally I would say it was in October of this year. It's actually January of next year. Right now, the federal government, the National Telecommunications Information Administration, is reviewing all of the program documents for the BEAD program. And so every state has a 90-day extension, because during these 90 days, they're looking at those program documents and deciding if they want to make any changes to the program itself. So we're waiting to see what those changes are. So because our sub-grantee selection process hasn't started, we want to see what those changes are before we run down with a program and then get told like halfway through, like, hey, you know what, you should change this and start over. So that's why we're waiting. We also have the Workforce Development Program. It's $50 million over 5 years, right? What that's going to go for is our growing demand for skilled broadband professionals. We have an industry sector partnership that I am not joking is first in the nation. We are one of the first states to actually address the workforce needs for broadband. We have over 40 training programs. We have training materials to help educate the incoming workforce. And we met with multiple internet service providers to address those needs. Because here's what's interesting. One of the things that we didn't know was coming when we first did this is that when we pumped $232 million into the system, right, AEP by itself had more pole permit applications, so someone saying, let me put a line on your pole, they had more pole permit applications in 3 months than they had in the 3 years prior. They were not ready for it. They did not see it coming. We didn't realize that was going to be an issue. Anyone ever call 811 and say, I'm going to put in a mailbox or a fence post or whatever the thing you have to do? Anyone ever call oops, right? It's one thing when you call oops and go like, hey, I'm going to go 100 feet because I'm putting a fence up. It's another thing to be like, hey, you have 48 hours to go mark 100 miles of where I'm going with fiber. Same thing. They weren't ready for it, right? So what this program is designed to do is to be able to see those things as they come and make sure we have a plan to be able to address the workforce needs. Our original plan was we did fiber splicers, tower climbers, 5G installers. We did all that kind of stuff because that was like the typical, pretty much everybody needed those things. We're moving into pole surveyors. We're moving into design techs who are actually design what the pole structures look like. We're moving into locators. And the reason we're doing those things is because we're able to use our industry sector partnership to pivot to the jobs people need to be able to continue to build this infrastructure. Now you may say like $50 million is a lot of money. Why are we using that much money? And the answer is, well, one, it's $50 million over 5 years. Two, we didn't want to underestimate and then have a large-scale plan need more money because we don't have any more money after this. So we wanted to make sure that that money was available. And I'll tell you, we're doing this for a selfish reason. So the selfish reason is this. we want Ohioans to benefit from the money. I want it to be an Ohioan who goes and gets the job to build the infrastructure, to put food on the table for their kids, to put a roof over their head. I want them to get a skill set that as we move into the future becomes more and more valuable because internet's not going away. Right? It's just going to become more ingrained into our lives, right? So I want them to be able to have those skill sets, to have a career if that's what they want to do, right? So we put this together so that we could go ahead and maintain those folks and have those folks in Ohio who want to benefit from the money that comes to our state. That was a big issue for us. We actually go so far in our BEAD program to give you points if you agree to actually hire people from our programs. Now, when I say our programs, I know OU is here, so they're a fantastic partner with us. OSU is actually the industry sector educational partner, so they're super partners with us. There's a lot, Buckeye Hills Regional Council's here. They've been a huge partner with us. And all of our ISPs that are here have also been huge partners with us. And we've been making this successful because we want to make sure that we can anticipate those needs as we go forward, right? So that's what this is for. If those ISPs then go ahead and promise to hire people from these programs, they get additional points. Because if an ISP is willing to say, like, yeah, we're going to stake our money on the fact that we want to hire from accredited programs, then we want to give them extra points so they beat someone who's like, not so sure. I'll hire someone who doesn't have any experience. Now, there are programs that won't be of these 40 that you could still go through. Okay, an example I always give is AT&T uses union labor, and so their union programs also qualify, so it's not like you have to use these. But these are ones that are already available, which means that you don't have to do anything. You don't have to prove to us that it meets standards. You don't have to prove to us that you have a curriculum internally. This was, if you go through these, you automatically qualify for those points. So how are grants awarded? So the first thing we do is we do a huge application overview. The application and process overview is we go, tell us everything just about your company. So it's all the boring stuff, right? It's, here's our key employees, here's our employee identification numbers, here's our name, here's the name we do business under, blah, 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 right? Like here's how, we've been in business for 80 years, 10 years, 50 years, 0 years, whatever. And then here's our audited financials. If we don't have audited financials, here's our unaudited financials. If we don't have unaudited financials, here's our pinky promise that we won't screw up, right? That's kind of what we do for the first part of the application process. Once that's done, we go into something very unique in the state of Ohio after our pre-qualification round, right? One of the reasons why it took Ohio so long to be able to get our program approved by the federal government, we were not approved until October. We were the third to last state to be approved, is a couple of reasons. One, because we already had the Residential Broadband Expansion Grant Program, which was a collaborative effort between the legislature and the governor's office. We were trying to make the program look as much like that as we could, and the NTIA, the National Telecommunications Information Administration, had very different ideas as to how the program should look. So we had a lot of friction and tried to do a compromise to make it look as much as what we had been using for a while. That's what we were trying to do. But one of the big things that we argued about was the dollar bid round. The dollar bid rounds is if you qualify and you actually go through the pre-qualification process, you can bid on a project area unit and win it as long as you're a fiber provider and you will receive no subsidy. So the state of Ohio will give you no money, you will get no BEAD money. You promise to do the BEAD requirements, you promise to build to those addresses, then you all in the room might go like, well, if I don't give you any money, if you don't build it, what are we gonna do, right? Then the answer is there's a liquidated damages provision in the contract. That's just a fancy legal lawyer way of saying that if they fail to bid, I have no idea what the damages are, so we're going to use a static number as the damage. So for Ohio, there's a company called CostQuest. They release a transparent data set of how much it would cost in every county to get fiber to that home. We use that number and say if you fail to bid, you owe the state of Ohio that much money per house so that we can build it if you don't. So that's what happens to them. And you may be asking yourself, like, well, why would anyone in their right mind go ahead and try to grab a project area unit and not get any money out of it, right? And I'll give you a one-word answer. It used to be Intel. It is now Anduril. If you look at Pickaway County or Licking County for Intel, there's a ton of area around where those factories are being located that do not have internet connectivity. If you go west of 23, outside of Circleville for the most part in Pickaway County, we have a lot of problems trying to get internet to those folks. So when Anduril locates right in the middle of Pickaway County, internet service providers are going to go, you know what, I would love to have an anchor tenant that's going to need hundreds of gigabits worth of data over the next 20 years to build all this stuff. I want to be the person that supplies it to them. So they're all going to rush to go down there to go ahead and make sure that they can serve that plant. Because they're going to do that anyway, our argument was, well, why should taxpayer dollars then go to subsidize that infrastructure? If you're all going to fall all over yourselves to go to specific areas anyway, do it. We'll let you have it. You won't have to, like, you will win. It will be prior to any, application rounds where we're going through a scoring process. You just say you're going to take those off our hands, and if you meet the pre-qualification criteria, you do. The reason we did that is because we need our $800 million to go as far as possible. So the best case scenario is that a whole bunch of companies bid on a whole bunch of areas because they're necessary for their infrastructure build plans. And the worst case scenario is nobody goes through that round, and we're in no worse off position than we ever were. Because if no one takes us up on that deal, then we'll go like, great. Then it is true that every single location that's left in Ohio needed a subsidy. This was our last double check to make sure that we weren't wasting taxpayer dollars by building to an area that someone would have built for nothing. That's why that program exists. Then we go to our first application round. Our first application round is a traditional round. We basically say, like, if you want an area, go ahead and apply for it. We're going to score you against everybody else. We're going to make sure that you can do what you say you're going to do, and then we will award the people for all those areas. Because of all of the great responses we got for ORBEG Round 1 and ORBEG Round 2, just about every address in the state of Ohio that's unserved or underserved, we are very close to having almost every single one of them have someone go like, I'd be willing to build that for at least some number, right? Maybe not an affordable number, but at least some number for the state of Ohio. And so as a result of that, we're very confident that we're going to get enough applications to cover just about everybody. They may not all get fiber. They may get fiber. They may get fixed wireless. Some of them may get satellite service. We'll see what the mix of technologies are, and we'll make decisions for each of those areas to make sure that we can spread internet coverage all across the state of Ohio, right? That's what happens. If in the first application round we have enough applications to get everybody, we are done. That is the end. We will not go forward, right? We'll have a party, we'll have a big banner and high five, and it'll be done. If, however, we don't get enough applications, we then go into negotiations. So anyone who took a project area unit next to one that doesn't have anything, we're going to sit down and maybe like, what can I do to get you in this car today, right? And we're going to say, do we need to waive the match requirement? Do we need to, waive the workforce requirement? What are the things that we need to get you to be willing to take that, right? Do you need to do a hybrid technology where you can get one technology to some of them, but you need us to use something else for the rest of them? We'll do that. If on the tail end of that, we don't get someone to go to that area, we will then do we will take all comers. So we will do one final round that goes, we will take any technology as long as it can do 100 down and 20 up, because we need to just get these people to have something in their hands so that they could call someone to get internet into their home. So the reason why we're coming along today is the application, you have to show us the list of addresses for the planned internet infrastructure. We actually split the state up into project area units, and they have to bid on the whole unit. We also have a demonstration of technical, managerial, and financial capacity. And then the big one that's up there is letters of support from the community. That is the most important thing that is up there for all of you in this room. Because your letters of support will probably mean whether someone does or does not get their grant. And I'll explain why. When the federal government designed this program, the cost per pass, so the cost, every house cost, so the cost it would be for each individual house, is worth 75% of the entirety of the score. We had a lot of back and forth with the NTIA about how we might be able to be creative and split that up, and ultimately it ended up being like, nope, 75% is cost the end. Of the 25% that's left, all of those components share the 25%. So the more other scored components I put into that, the less each of them were worth. So if I put 50 components in there, each would only be worth half a point, because each of them would only be able to do that. So we thought very long and hard about what those points were going to be. Workforce is one, letters of support are the other, right? If you're a county commissioner and you pass a resolution that supports the project, it is worth the most points. And when I say pass a resolution, I do in fact mean pass a resolution. You can't just write a letter of support. It has to be a resolution that you voted on as county commissioners, and that's what you send, right? And the reason that is that gives you an opportunity to talk to all your providers in your district, and you can be like, hey, I'd love to support you. How about you show up at a hearing and walk us through what you're going to do, right? Tell us. All this stuff needs to be built by 2030, right? Are we the 2030 county, or are we the 2026 county? Where are we on your build plan? Where are we on the map, right? What kind of technologies are you going to use? How are you going to talk to my constituents to make sure that they understand that you're coming? What are you going to do when one of your contractors rips up grandma's azaleas and she gets real mad about it? How are you going to make sure that they're made whole? What is your process to remediate any of the mistakes that may happen? Because we know you make no mistakes, but your contractors might. So how do we make sure that they keep the community whole? Those are questions you can ask. Township trustees and mayors, same thing. Now for township trustees and mayors, you do not actually have to have a resolution voted on. So as long as you write a letter of support, it still counts. But again, this is an opportunity for you to say, like, come in, talk to me about what you want to do so that I can tell my constituents when to expect the trucks, when to expect remediation if a mistake is made, when to expect service in general, right? And if you're an economic development organization, you also count. So again, this is an opportunity to be like, hey, how are you going to tell our businesses this is here? What kind of rates are they going to see? How are we going to make sure that their needs are also met? We want you to do residential, but how can you make sure that when you come out here, you're not doing the bare minimum to say that you're done, but that you're going to help us with sites that are on site selection, right? With places that you're like, look, we have business parks that we're trying to sell. How are we going to make sure that you can get to those as well? These are the questions you can ask. Because again, I'm telling you this, we made sure that the cost per pass wasn't going to be the deal breaker. And here's how we did it. The way our cost per pass in Ohio works is instead of just going who's the cheapest, we actually go what's the average. So if the average is $5,000, right? Then if you bid $4,000, you get 75% of the points. Like $5,000 would be 50% of the points. $4,000 would be 75% of the points. And then $3,000 would be 100% of the points. $2,000 would be 100% of the points. $1,000 would be 100% of the points, right? So when you look at the state of Ohio, we're trying to mitigate out anyone who's like, well, I'm just going to race to the bottom, right? I'm going to bid $1,000 even though I can't afford it as a company just to grab those locations and I'll figure it out over the next 5 years. No, we want to allow you to be honest and know that because we're doing it off of an average, it doesn't benefit you to try to race down to the bottom because if you're at $1,000 and someone else is at $3,000, you scored the same, right? So trying to get people to be in that band of where they think they can actually be successful with these projects. So since that happened, then your letter of support that may go to that company that has a $3,000 pass and you didn't support the company that has a $2,000 pass, they scored the same on that 75%. Your letter will mean the difference if what they score on that 25%. So these letters of support are very valuable to us because the other thing it does is you have an opportunity here to make decisions about who you trust and who you want to work with, right? You can say no. For any of the local leaders in this room, if you don't like a provider, now granted, I love all of them equally, right? But if you don't like a provider, right, then you can say, I'm not writing you a letter of support. Or again, like I said, you can say, like, if you want our support, this is what we're looking for. Can you guarantee that for us, right? We wanted you to have that ability to talk through that at the beginning, which is why this is there and why it's so important to us now. And I'll tell you this, the real biggest reason why we're out here, one, is because I hate being in Columbus all the time. And I think it's awful when people are like, you got to come to Columbus if you want to talk to an agency or a department or whatever. So we try very hard to go out. We try to meet people where they are. You guys know this place way better than I ever will. Ever will. I will never know where to get the best ice cream. I'm sure many of you do, right? I'm not going to know, well, actually, Matt from my staff will because he actually went to school here, right? So, but for I won't know the best pizza place. I'm not going to know where to go, right? When we went to Monroe County the first time, I walked into Monroe High School because we did a telehealth pilot project there. When I walked in wearing this, kids scattered. I asked the principal why, and they said, they think you're cops. And I went, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. We went to a community stakeholder session that was at 8 p.m. in a wonderful high school auditorium, and I walked in, guy on stage, no joke, looked at me, and I looked at everybody else. He goes, state guys here. Right? I was the only person in a suit, right? Everybody else was just in, slacks and a polo or slacks and a button down, right? So I'm never going to be in this or of this community because this isn't where I live. This is where all of you live. So you need to make those decisions about who you want to work with and who's going to do right by you and your community. So, give you a quick timeline. There's a whole bunch of information. The big things you got to know is in summer, we will run our subgrantee selection process. That includes that pre-qualification and all those rounds I was talking about. And in January, our final proposal will be submitted to the NTIA with a plan to cover every single address that I've shown you. That is what that is for. So the big thing for me that I always like to say is, like, I am literally working myself out of a job, because by the end of 2030, we will have either built all of these addresses and I'm useless, you should fire me, or we have not built all of those addresses, so I screwed up, so you should fire me. So either way, sometime in December of 2030, we should have a going away party for me. And my hope is that we're on the side of it all being done, right? Because we've been working so hard to make sure that we've identified those locations and that we have the necessary tools for our providers to build out to everyone. So if you want to look on our website, you can see that's actually a screenshot of our website. We have the Broadband Ohio website. We also have what's called the Broadband Ohio Alliance. It's a very large group of people. There's about 600, I think, people on it right now. We send out an email maybe once a month, and then about once a quarter we have a meeting where you can come and we'll tell you what we're doing. We typically have presentations from vendors, anywhere from new and emerging technologies to how communities, actually provided broadband service to folks, to digital opportunity programs that people have done. So it kind of runs the whole spectrum of the things that we do. So if you want to join that, you can come grab me or Matt at the end. We also work on digital opportunity. So really, what is digital opportunity? Like I was saying before, digital opportunity is making sure that people not only have internet connections, but have the capability of using them either through a device or something else, and that they can do it safely, right? We want to make sure that they're online and online safely. So some of the things that we do are digital skills training. Some of them are device ecosystems. We've done things to help train people on how to use telehealth. We've done telehealth connections to remote sites so that you could go somewhere and not have to go all the way to a hospital. Those all count as digital opportunity. One of the ones that we've done as well is that in Dayton, there are 3 rec centers. Those 3 rec centers did not have internet connectivity, and a lot of after-school programs were there and a lot of community programs. So we were able to have a partnership with an internet service provider, and we were able to bring connectivity to those locations for that free public Wi-Fi I was talking about. We don't want you to be 5 miles away from that. So those are the kinds of things that happen with digital opportunity. We have a digital opportunity plan online right now. You can go read it if you want to see kind of our plan to try to address a lot of the digital opportunity needs throughout the state. And we also have our regional digital inclusion alliances. We split the state up into 5 regions. Many states do a top-down approach. So there's someone in an office in their capital that goes, here's how digital opportunity should work for the state. And instead, in Ohio, again, like I said before, I'm like, we have no idea what's best for all of you. Buckeye Hills Regional Council is actually our regional digital inclusion alliance for Southeast Ohio. They help work with all of the nonprofits, all of the local leaders, and everyone else to talk about the needs that are specific to Southeast Ohio, right? So right, like we're talking about Appalachian communities, we're talking about a lot of rural communities. Yes, we do also have some metropolitan areas, but that's very different from the folks who are doing Central Ohio, right? Who are worried about Columbus and worried about the data centers in Licking County and Honda and Union County, right? So we want to make sure that all of our regional digital inclusions alliances, that's hard to say, we're all empowered to be able to help us with that digital opportunity planning, so that we had something that was effective for your region instead of just being me in Columbus going, this is what you shall do. So we work very closely with our RDIAs, as they are called, to make sure that we're addressing the digital opportunity needs of your community. Now, one bad thing, I do have one quick, before we get to questions, we're going to do 2 quick things. One, when we talk about digital opportunity, the state of Ohio had $23 million out of what's called the Digital Equity Act. That was also part of the Investment in Infrastructure and Jobs Act. That $23 million is gone. The administration 2 weeks ago decided to cancel the entirety of that program, so we have lost that $23 million. We're working on a few, we had a few public posts for different contracts that we were looking for, and we had started our subgrantee selection process for digital opportunity skill sets in Ohio, and unfortunately those currently are paused while we figure out if there's another way that we may be able to support some of that work, especially in like the workforce arena, the digital skills arena. So we're working on that now. So the bad news is right now that we do not have funding for a lot of the digital opportunity work that we were planning on, but we are going to do everything we can to try to re-engage and see what we can do to support those projects in the future. And we also, I'm going to have Matt come up just for a second and talk a little bit about our pole replacement program for any of the internet service providers in the room, so you can hear a little bit about one of the ways that we're also helping with the expense of getting to unserved areas that isn't just through like a grant program on a per house basis. So Matt, if you want to talk for just 5 seconds or so on, well, longer than 5 seconds, but